Aisha knelt quietly in the corner of her grandmother's small hut, carefully mending an old piece of cloth. Her hands moved with practiced grace, weaving thread through one fabric with gentle care. The hut was filled with the warm scent of spices, dried herbs, and the faint smoke from the cooking fire that burned low in the corner. Her grandmother, Mama Khadija, sat on a straw mat nearby, her eyes clouded but still sharp with wisdom. Outside, the village of Koriti bustled with life. Children ran through the dusty paths, playing and laughing, while their parents tended to daily chores, carrying water from the well, herding goats, or grinding millet. Aisha had spent her whole life here, surrounded by the rhythm of village life. But she felt the pull of something beyond the horizon, something that called to her from afar. Aisha, Mama Khadija said, her voice breaking Aisha's reverie. You've always had an old soul, but your eyes look forward. You're like a bird perched on the edge of a nest, ready to fly. Aisha looked up at her grandmother, a question in her eyes. I'm happy here, grandmother, she replied, though she knew deep down it wasn't entirely true. She often found herself gazing toward the mountains that framed the village, wondering what lay beyond. Mama Khadija chuckled softly, her voice raspy with age. Oh, my child, happiness is like weaving. It's made of many threads: family, love, work, and sometimes, curiosity. But curiosity is a restless thread, it never stays still. Your mother was the same. Aisha paused, listening. Her mother had passed away when she was very young, and her father had left the village shortly after, never to return. Mama Khadija had raised her since, filling the spaces left behind with stories and love. But her mother's spirit had always lingered like an unspoken presence, a thread woven into the fabric of her life. Aisha, do you remember the story of the red cloth? Mama Khadija asked, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Aisha nodded. The red cloth was a legend in their family, a piece of fabric that was said to bring strength and courage to its wearer. Her grandmother had told her the story many times, how it was passed down from generation to generation, each ancestor adding a new thread to mark their journey. It's time for you to wear it, Mama Khadija said, reaching under a woven basket beside her. She pulled out a small, faded red cloth, its edges frayed, yet vibrant with the hues of the past. Aisha's heart leaped as her grandmother placed it gently in her hands. But I thought you would keep it until... She trailed off, not wanting to finish the thought. Mama Khadija smiled, her eyes full of knowing. Every thread in that cloth holds a story, a memory, a lesson from our ancestors. It's time for you to add your own. It's time for you to follow your own path, wherever it may lead. The next morning, with the cloth carefully wrapped around her wrist, Aisha set out from the village for the first time in her life. She felt a mix of excitement and uncertainty, the pull of her dreams mixed with the weight of her heritage. As she walked toward the mountains, she could feel the threads of yesterday guiding her steps, whispering stories of resilience and courage. Aisha traveled for days, crossing valleys and climbing rocky paths. She encountered villages and towns unlike her own, each one filled with people who shared their food, shelter, and stories. She listened, learning from every person she met, the cloth around her wrist growing one with each mile, absorbing the dust and sun of her journey. One evening, as she rested by a river, she met an elderly man named Boko, who sat carving a small wooden figure by the firelight. They struck up a conversation, and Aisha shared the story of the red cloth, explaining how it held the spirit of her family's legacy. Boko listened intently, nodding as she spoke. That cloth is a gift, he said, his voice deep and calm. But it is not the cloth that makes you strong, Aisha. It's the threads inside you, the ones woven from your heart and your experiences. You carry your ancestors with you wherever you go. Aisha nodded, his words resonating deeply. She realized that her journey was not just about discovering the world but also about discovering herself. As she traveled on, she began to see each step as part of her own tapestry, each choice a new thread woven into the cloth of her life. Months passed, and Aisha continued her journey, crossing rivers, forests, and deserts. She met people from every walk of life, traders, farmers, healers, and warriors. With each encounter, she grew wiser and stronger, the red cloth on her wrist becoming more faded and worn, yet richer with the memories it held. Eventually, Aisha came upon a village that seemed to be struggling. The people were weary, their crops failing, and a deep sadness hung in the air. She learned that the village was suffering from a drought, and despite their efforts, they could not find water. Feeling a sense of duty, Aisha decided to stay and help. She remembered the stories her grandmother had told her about finding water in dry lands, and she shared what she knew with the villagers. Together, they dug deep wells, built channels, and prayed for rain. Her days were long, her hands blistered, but she felt a deep sense of purpose, knowing she was giving back to the world as her ancestors had done before her. One night, as she sat by a small fire with the villagers, she looked down at the red cloth on her wrist. It was tattered now, its color almost gone, yet it felt heavier with the weight of her journey. She realized that she had finally become part of the cloth, her own threads woven into its legacy. The rains came soon after, and the village celebrated with joy and gratitude. Aisha knew it was time for her to return home, her heart filled with stories and wisdom that she was eager to share with her grandmother. When she arrived back in Koriti, she found Mama Khadija waiting for her, seated on her straw mat with a quiet smile. Aisha knelt before her, holding out the red cloth, now faded but vibrant with memories. Mama Khadija took it in her hands, her eyes glistening. "You've woven your own path, child," she whispered. "And you have returned, as strong as your mother, as wise as your ancestors." Aisha smiled, feeling the weight of her journey lift as she settled back into her village, her heart forever touched by the threads of yesterday, guiding her towards the path of tomorrow.